Aloha guys, this is How to Help Save Sharks, Part 1, Legislation. Legislation, or the passing of laws, is so important. It's kind of that ultimate goal. We want to get sharks fully protected everywhere in the world. Now, different countries have different government setups, so I will describe the process that Juan and I and other caring members of the community went through to get sharks fully protected in Hawaii, which we were successful in, but it did take many years. I'm really sharing this not just to say, yay, we got them protected. I mean, that's huge. But I'm sharing this because I'm really hoping somebody out there will be watching this and being like, I can do this for sharks in Florida. I can stop, shark fishing tournaments in Texas or in another state. So if you guys do that, please tag me in your efforts. I'd love to repost that, retag that. We can always write in. It is more impactful when you're writing in as somebody that lives in that state, but we still want to support other people in the community that are trying to make that impact in their home state or their home country. So just like the EU shark fin ban, we got a lot of attention on that, which helped to get the million minimum votes that was required to force Parliament to actually consider that. So that was really huge because we're not EU citizens, but we can at least use our platform to reach as many of our EU friends and people in the EU as possible by geotagging EU countries and EU individual organizations so that they're aware and so that they can get involved. So even if you're not from that state or that country, you can still help to support others who are trying to do this around the world. So in 2010, sharks were protected from finning, and then a number of years later, there was a bill drafted for a proposed law to fully protect sharks from wasteful and purposeful killing. It was actually for sharks and rays. And so we worked with a lot of other caring members of the community, a lot of individuals, a lot of nonprofit groups, and everybody connected with and spoke to different politicians. And we got as many politicians on board as possible to get the bill introduced. So when you introduce a bill, you're introducing it to one of two legislative branches. So either the House of Representatives or the Senate. So in Hawaii, we have the Capitol building, so the Hawaii State Capitol, and that's where all the legislative processes are going to go on. And so one side is for the House of Representatives and the other side is for the Senate, where they can be on different floors. And then there's a bunch of committees on each side that will hear this proposed bill for a law. And then there's a whole legislative calendar. So there's certain deadlines, datelines that bills have to be scheduled to be heard by a committee for the bill to continue on during the legislative calendar. For us, it's around January 20th that a bill has to be introduced, and that's usually wrapping up around the end of April. If it passes through all of the committees on both the House of Representatives side and the Senate side, it will then be voted on, and then sent to the governor. And then the governor can either veto it, kick it back, or he can sign it into law. So that eventually happened for us, but many years in the making. So the ideal situation is to talk to enough politicians and community members, both individuals and nonprofits and other organizations, including businesses, to get them to write into all the politicians, both senators and representatives. So representatives, House of Representatives. Because what you ideally want to do is get the bill written up and introduced into the Senate side at the same time that it is written up in maybe a slightly different verbiage and introduced on the House of Representatives sides. And we call these sister bills. And it gives a bill a little bit higher chance of getting through, because that way if it dies on one side, it can keep going on the other. And so some years it was only introduced into one side, some years it was supported enough to get introduced into both. As it gets scheduled for committees, each committee is going to vote on it. And these committees can have different names. For us, they're names like Ways and Means. They're going to look at financing and they're going to evaluate, okay, how do we finance a bill like this? Or Land and Water. So the Land and Water is going to look at what are the implications of this new proposed law on natural resources. And so it's going to have to go through all the committees. Sometimes a bill will be scheduled for two committees simultaneously, and then sometimes they'll be scheduled for one or sometimes even three. And so it's got to go through all these different committees on each legislative branch, then it's got to get voted on again and cross over to the other legislative branch. So if you guys are watching this, you're from Florida, you want to help get sharks protected in Florida, I really, really hope that that's the case, because sharks over in Florida could really use a lot of help because people are fishing them every single day. Try and talk to every single politician you possibly can, whether they're a senator or a representative, and try and get as many community groups involved and individuals involved, so that at every community level, you're writing in to all the politicians that are scheduled to be on these committees, committee members, and you're saying, hey, you're going to be hearing this bill number, HB 808. It's literally one of the ones that it was this year, or one of the years. You're going to be hearing this, and I am from your district. I live in your district, so you have representatives that are representing each district based on where you live. That's why it's really powerful when someone from that state is actually writing in, because then you're voting for your representatives and your senators for each state. So you write in and say, hey, this is important to me because of X, Y, and Z. And actually that bill, the proposed law, will usually actually state the reasons why it's important to community members to have this bill being introduced. So for sharks, we wrote their ecological importance, and we also wrote their cultural significance, and then we also wrote their economic value. And so those are all like three very, very strong reasons to help protect sharks. For Florida, off the top of my head, you could definitely put the ecological importance, the declining shark populations. You could put the economic value, and then you can also put safety, because some of these night fishermen, they're actually burying fish at the shoreline, and then come morning time, they go home, and then somebody goes out swimming, and that's essentially baiting the sharks closer to shore, and that's encouraging more accidents to happen. So put for public safety as well. If anybody is willing to take this up, I really hope that you are, especially in Florida and other areas where they're having like shark fishing tournaments and things like that. You could even do a bill to propose a law to ban shark fishing tournaments. So banning the shark fishing tournaments might be a great kind of intro start. You just get that, and then you go to the next thing, but I'm like, go for all of it. And as you forge more connections with different politicians and different members of the community through education, that's really going to help it along. But just keep in mind and prep everybody that you're working with that you're going to need to contact politicians and committee members at every single committee round. So in our first couple of years, doing calls to action through social media, we would get thousands of people to write in for the first couple committees. And then a lot of people would see our call to actions. They're like, oh, I already wrote in. They don't realize that you have to do it so many times. And what Juan and I would do, and we would have our team do this as well, is that we would just halt everything when we knew that there was a moment to go testify, and we would stop and we would drive across the island and we would go testify in person. So we'd write in testimony online. There's nothing quite like sitting in front of a panel of a bunch of committee member politicians and saying, hey, I am from this district, I've been working with sharks, or sharks are important for me for this reason, and this is why I'm asking you to support this law. I think that they're a lot more receptive to listening to people who actually care enough to come and testify in person. So I don't think there's any substitute for that, but with thousands of testimony being written in. Now, we did realize a little bit later in the process too that the bill was getting so far along, and then right at the end something would happen. I remember one year rays got the protection, but at the end they dropped out the sharks, and that was because the longline fisheries guys were saying, oh, this might somehow affect our business, and they were worried about it, even though they operate a lot further offshore. And I do wish that we could ban the killing of the sharks by the longline fisheries, but because they came in and possibly, I don't know if they paid somebody, I'm not going to say anything like that, but that was one reason. Another reason was, surprisingly, there were two old scientists that actually did work with sharks, and they were like, we don't want additional paperwork. And so they were just throwing anything out there to try and shut down this bill. And then I think there were enough politicians that were still working to remember that they had done the same thing back in prior to 2010. And they were like, no, we don't want to support the ban on shark finning. And I'm like, why would you not support the ban on shark finning? That's a little weird. Turns out one of them's invested in longline fisheries. But so they kind of got, ruled out. And so just be aware that anytime that you have people that you're asking to write in to support a bill, you may get some opposition. And usually they're going to be, they don't know much about the law or much about the bill. A lot of them I can tell wouldn't even read it, but you should still address all of their points in subsequent committees. Or if there's any committee members that don't support the bill, try and have a conversation with them, win them over to your side, try and educate them about, hey, why X, Y, and Z points of non-support should be ruled out and why your points for supporting the protection of sharks should be ruled in. So just educate the politicians too, because they're hearing bills across the board about everything, about drainage and real estate and all sorts of stuff. So it comes down to you spending a little time to actually educate the politicians. So if they're on another committee and then it goes back around to them, that they don't shut it down. So don't give up hope. Know that there's going to be some opposition. Address their points. Keep consistent at it. Write in testimony if you can. Get as many people as you can to testify in person. Makes a big deal. And just every year that maybe it gets shut down, just try and gain further and further support. Educate your audiences that you're reaching out to, if you're reaching out on social media, about the many steps that are involved in this process. That's kind of what I'm trying to do right now. And I'm really sharing this not just to say, yay, we got them protected. I mean, that's huge. But I'm sharing this because I'm really hoping somebody out there will be watching this and being like, I can do this for sharks in Florida. I can stop, shark fishing tournaments in Texas or in another state. So if you guys do that, please tag me in your efforts. I'd love to repost that, retag that. We can always write in. It is more impactful when you're writing in as somebody that lives in that state, but we still want to support other people in the community that are trying to make that impact in their home state or their home country. So it's the best time in the world for shark conservation because we've never had so many supporters. And I really think that's because of the amount of education going through social media, immersive programs, or dives like One Ocean, where people can go out, learn about sharks, feel a connection, learn about the plight of sharks, that over 100 million sharks are being killed every year for wasteful reasons like shark finning, shark fishing, shark culling, shark fin soup. Man, I could make a whole video on the laws that need to change in Australia around the shark nets and the drum lines. But I know that there are a lot of people out there who are doing things. So please help support them. Please reshare it in your social media, because even if you're not a member of that or a member of that country, a citizen of that country, that you can help to raise awareness for them to reach other members or citizens of that country. So thank you guys so much again. Please check out How to Save Sharks Part 2, totally different video. And thank you so much to everyone who helped to support us. There were a lot of really great scientists, nonprofits, and individuals from around the world that when we made the call to support the protection of sharks in Hawaii, the beautiful sharks that Juan Sharks and I grew up with, that a lot of people from around the world wrote in support. And I really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much. Mahalo nui loa. Best wishes to you and yours. And let's get more sharks protected.